Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military of a Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 30th of August of 2025. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And telling the truth, today the 30th of August of 2025, probably the most important and the most interesting day for every single mapper who follows the situation on the ground in the area of the special military operation, the most important day since the beginning of this special military operation. The thing is that today the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, as well as the General Staff of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation, reported about the current situation on the ground and reported about the end of the summer military campaign of 2025. So this is Gerasimov, the head of, let's say, General Staff of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation, Chief of the General Staff, and during this meeting he reported about the situation on the ground and many other important things. So very huge report, how the Russians are moving in this or that direction, and the most important part of this video first is that the Russians gave us insights and details about the situation, let's say, in the area of the city of Severesk and Pokrovsk, and the most important is this part of the report, because the Minister of Defense for the Russian Federation, for the first time since the beginning of the special military operation, provided us a detailed map about the situation on the ground. Of course, from this angle, it is very difficult to understand where exactly the lines go, but telling the truth, we compared almost every single square kilometer of this map provided by the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation and, let's say, the map of the military summary, and we came to shocking conclusions about some front lines. We will discuss this in details. As for a report of the Minister of Defense, they gave us a few important things that I would like to point your attention. The formation and military units of the West group of forces have almost completely blocked the city of Kupyansk and liberated about half of its territory. Very important statement, and I would like to point your attention. Just keep this information in mind. We will discuss this in a minute. Another important thing is that the southern group of troops is successfully developing an offensive in the northern direction. Battles, this is the most important part, are taking place within the city limits of the city of Siversk. So the Minister of Defense, the General Staff today reported that the Russians liberated around 50% of the city of Kupyansk and the city is blocked. And the second thing is that the clashes are already taking place on the territory of the city of Siversk. Now let's return to the map and let's compare and let's try to find the differences between the report of the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, the General Staff, and the map of military summary and most of the mappers. And that's so because you know that we add our own adjustments and we usually use resources, different mappers to compare the gray zones, contested areas, and the territories that were, let's say, discovered or geolocated of Russian control. And first, let's talk about the Kupyansk direction, and I'll tell you, you will be shocked when we will add the progress on the ground that today was revealed by the General Staff. So once again, we are going to talk about the Kupyansk. Once again, the Gerasimov stated to the Chief of General Staff that the city 50% liberated by the Russians, according to their understanding of the situation. Of course, the Ukrainians would say 50% captured, and he said that the city is almost blocked. So what does it mean blocked? So this is the map of the Kupyansk direction once again. So this territory, all these red territories are the territories that were taken by the Russians during the previous days and during the previous weeks and months, and the most important part is this pocket. This pocket is the city of Kupyansk itself, so and the Kupyansk agglomeration. So as you can see, we have the same pocket on the military summary map. So this is the pocket on our map, and this is the pocket on the map of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation. And of course, the most important pocket piece of map of this pocket is is this small pocket to the west of the city of Kupyansk. And of course, the most important task was to recognize and to find this pocket on the map of the military summary. And of course, from this angle and from this zoom, without titles, without borders, without anything, very difficult to recognize where exactly this pocket lays. And so that is why we need to search for details. And there are a few very interesting details that can allow us to find this small pocket on the map of the military summary. So, and I would like to point your attention to these small green clouds. Maybe the quality of picture and maybe the quality of this video doesn't allow you to see any pockets, but there are pockets, and if you have access to map, you can always find them. So this is the first green cloud, and this is the second one. And we found these forests on the territory of this pocket. We are talking about this first green cloud, and this is the second one. And as you can see, this Russian territory control lays right to the west, a bit to the west-north from the, let's say, northern green pocket. So Russian positions are very, very close to this northern green pocket according to the map of the General Staff, which means that the armored forces of the Russian Federation by the beginning or by the end of the 30th of August of 2025 were controlling something like this. So this pocket, this territory is in the complete Russian control, according to the General Staff of the Armored Forces of the Russian Federation and according to official understanding of the situation by the Minister of Defense. So this is the situation on the ground, and of course, when talking about this configuration of the line of combat contact, the Ukrainians were caught in cauldron without any chances for evacuation. The city of Kupyansk were blocked from the west, or as the Minister of Defense said that, told us, is about to be blocked from most likely western direction. The Ukrainians have just a small corridor between the settlements of Osinova and Kolysnikovka. We're talking about this part. The length of this part is less than 10 kilometers, but as you can see, there are rivers, lakes, very problematic terrain, very problematic ground for evacuation. And I would like to remind you that if we increase the numbers of updates since the beginning of August, the biggest number of icons of FPV drone attacks took place exactly in this area, and we have already added a killing zone because the Russians published hundreds of episodes of how they were attacking Ukrainians. Those are Ukrainians who were trying to escape this encirclement. First of all, we're talking about 14th Mechanized Brigade and many other groups of the armored forces of Ukraine. So this is a complete disaster for the armored forces of Ukraine, according to the Minister of Defense and the General Staff of the Armored Forces of the Russian Federation. As for the situation on the ground, during the previous 24 hours, some pro-Russian resources confirmed Russian progress on the ground in this area, and pro-Ukrainian resources, for example, reported that Ukrainians counter-attacked and managed to restore control over a part of the settlement of Mirova. So when talking about this map, nothing like this happened or nothing like this was recorded as changes by the, let's say, when talking about pro-Ukraine counter-attack by the end of the 30th of August of 2025. Now let's move further, and now let's discuss the situation in the Lyman direction. We have very interesting map published by the Minister of Defense and General Staff as well. So today, several pro-Russian resources reported that the armored forces of the Russian Federation managed to break through Ukrainian defense in the northern direction, in the Barova direction. The Russians answered the village of Malievka, according to several pro-Russian resources. The Russians furthermore managed to answer the settlement by the name of Andreevka and to take the settlement under complete control. The Russians furthermore secured the settlement of Olgovka and answered this territory, and the Russians answered the village of Druzhelyubovka. So according to several pro-Russian resources, not according to the General Staff of the Armored Forces of the Russian Federation, this is a mapper like the military summary, but pro-Russian mapper who shows just the progress on the ground because he has connections with the soldiers or something like this. and they are saying that the Russians took these 4 villages during the previous 24 hours. Obviously, this is a significant progress on the ground, but the most important is that when talking about the map that was revealed today by the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, nothing like this is true, because as you can see, this is a red line, and this is a red line, and this is the border between Donetsk region and the Kharkiv region. So this is the line on our map, and as you can see, according to this map, just a small pocket, just a small territories were taken by the Russians, but the pro-Russian resources reported that the progress is much bigger. Maybe this map was made, for example, by the end of the 29th or 28th of August, because of course it requires some time to prepare meeting, to prepare this big, let's say, picture of this map and to print it or something like this. So maybe that we believe that maybe this map reflects the situation, let's say, by the end of several days ago, let's say by the end of 28th of August. And this progress on the ground was made by the Russians during the previous 2 days. So maybe everything is okay with this map, with this pro-Russian resource, but at the same time, maybe this is a fake information. Furthermore, according to the map that was published by the General Staff, the settlement of Shandrigalovo was encircled by the Russians from the north and from the south. So I would like to point your attention to this territory and to this forest. This bottom green cloud is this forest. I believe you can recognize this forest here and this forest on the map. So this is basically the coordinates and the orienteer flag that we can use to understand where exactly the Russian positions to the east. And according to this forest, we see that the edge Russian positions a bit further in the southeastern direction from the, let's say, end point, final point of this forest. So based on this, we can make a conclusion that currently the Russians control something like this in the area of the settlement of Shandrigalovo. And of course, we're not talking about progress on the ground on the Ukrainian side of the river of Nitrius. When talking about this map, the Russians control everything along this red line. So the village of Serednya, the village of Karpovka, and the village of Shandrigalovo was encircled by the Russians according to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation. The village of Nitrius was cut by the Russians, the main supply lines were cut by the Russians, the Ukrainians were caught in cauldron, and now most likely the village of Shandrigalovo is under siege of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation. Very interesting progress on the ground. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Lyman Siversk direction. So as for this map, we see that the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation shown us less progress on the ground in comparison with maps that we can find, let's say, from different resources, pro-Russian, pro-Ukraine, many others. First of all, according to the Ministry of Defense, the Russians have no positions on the territory of the settlement by the name of Zaporizhzhia. And as you can see, we have some changes. We have Russian control in the southern part, we have Russian control, let's say, in the central part along the river of Zherebets. The Ministry of Defense tell us that there is no progress and no positions of the Russians on the territory of this village, which means that either the map is by the end of the 28th of August or something like this, or the Russians were forced to fall back because they haven't managed to dig in deeper. Very interesting map was shown by the General Staff of the territory in the Serebryanka forest. Most of the mappers, pro-Ukraine mappers, pro-Russian mappers, show that the territory of the forest is under almost complete control of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation. But when talking about the General Staff, they show several areas of breakthrough. One line, another line, and the second line. So, which means that maybe the rest of the forest is in the gray zone or is in contested area but not under control. But at the same time, we see that the Russians are not tasked to take every single square kilometer or every single square meter of the forest under complete control. So we have differences, and we understand the differences because obviously it's impossible to control the entire forest. The Russians control just the main roads and so on. And now we are coming to the city of Siversk. Once again, let's return back to the report that was published by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation. They stated that battles are taking place within the city limits of the city of Siversk. The Russians are saying that the clashes are taking place already on the territory of the city of Siversk. The Russians are already on the territory of the city. So the Russians are there, not somewhere around on the outskirts. The Russians are already on the territory of Siversk, and the General Staff and the Chief of the General Staff emphasized this, which is very important. So let's return back to the map, and the most important thing is small pockets to the southeast of the city of Siversk, this one, and very interesting changes the Ministry of Defense shows to the north of the city of Siversk. If we try to add Russian-controlled territory according to the General Staff, the Russians control something like this. These territories, almost until these facilities is under complete Russian control, then Russians, so all these fields until these facilities under Russian control, once again. And another important thing is the Russians control significant territories to the southeast of the city of Siversk, and something like this is also under complete Russian control. So as we can see, the city of Siversk was taken by the Russians in pincers. This is the southern pocket and this is the northern situation. And we have a very small corridor, which means that the Russians somehow managed to answer the city of Siversk, most likely using these routes of attack. So this is the situation on the ground that today was revealed by the Minister of Defense and by the by the Chief of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation. And as you can see, we have a huge gap. As for the situation on the ground, we have lots of videos of how Russians continue their bombing and attacking the city, trying to discover positions of FPV drone operators. So nothing special, nothing that can confirm additional and such a significant progress on the ground of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Kostyantynivka direction, and more precisely in the direction of cities of Kramatorsk and Slavyansk. So this is the map that was published by the General Staff, and telling the truth, the most important things are coming not even from the city of Kostyantynivka. To my mind, the most important things are coming from the area between the city of Chasiv Yar and the city of Kramatorsk. So we are talking about this pocket, and it's not just a pocket, this is another breakthrough. So this is the map published by the General Staff, and this is the situation on the military summary map. And telling the truth, most of the mappers shows almost the same picture that you can see right now here. So plus minus a few kilometers to the west or to the east. But if we try to let's say to draw changes that were made by the Minister of Defense and the General Staff, the map in this direction looks like this. So according to the General Staff, the armed force of the Russian Federation during the previous days managed to encircle the settlement of Fedorovka, managed to not capture, but to cut in cauldron the settlement of Markova. The Russians managed to outflank the settlement of Minkovka and to get as close as possible to the village of Tikhonovka. Once again, the map, as you can see, breakthrough, one city encircled, one village encircled, another village encircled, and third village encircled. So we are talking about these three settlements. First village encircled by the Russians, the second village encircled by the Russians, and the third village encircled by the Russians. So as you can see, this is the situation on the ground according to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation. And if this information is correct, if this is true, this is the beginning of probably the biggest collapse ever we might see since the beginning of the special military operation, because the distance between possible Russian edge positions, let's say in the vicinity of Fedorovka and the city of Kramatorsk and its airfield, is already less than 6 kilometers. So this is nothing. This is not, the only thing we don't know for sure when exactly the Russians managed to get to improve their positions so much in this area. Maybe a month ago, maybe 2 days ago, maybe 3 months ago, maybe even a year ago. As for now, it's very difficult to understand, but this is the situation in this area. Furthermore, According to the general staff, the Russians answered the city of Kostyantynivka at least in 2 places. The Russians answered the city of Kostyantynivka using these dachas and this residential part, and the Russians answered the city of Kostyantynivka along M32 road. You can find these two, let's say, these two advances, these two breakthrough, also on the map revealed by the general staff. As for the rest, let's say, as for the situation, let's say in the vicinity of Kliban-Byk, Terivanovka, Kliban-Bykskaya water reserve, the villages of Yablunovka, Stepanovka. So here everything is almost the same as we can see that was revealed by the general staff. So the map corresponds and fits 100%. Almost no changes, almost no differences between the map of the general staff and the map of the military summary. Now we are moving to the Pokrovsk direction and to the area of breakthrough. Here we have lots of very interesting details that were revealed by the general staff. So this is the situation. This is the area we're going to talk about. And when talking about this territory, there are several regions that worth our attention. This is the first one. This is the area to the southeast of the settlement of Gruskaya. So first of all, as you can see, this is the first road, this is the second road. So 2 roads, as you can see, and these are 2 roads we are talking about the map. So this is the first road and this is the second one. Let's add them to the map for better understanding. So this is the first road and this is the second road. And if we go back to the map, these are the roads we are talking about, the first one and the second one. So according to the general staff, Russians have positions between 2 roads. So we have the same. Russians have positions between these 2 roads, and this is very important thing. Not even these 2 roads. This one, the second road, is somewhere here. This road isn't visible. This one is the railways. So this is very important difference. So this is the railways between the settlement of Dorozhnya further in the northwestern directions through the settlement of Stepe. So this is the first one. This is the first road, and most likely this one is the road between Kucherov Yar, Zolotoy Kolodец, and further in the direction of Petrivka and Lidina. So let's remove this one because we may make a mistake. First, let's add the roads as it is on the map. So this is the first road published by the general staff, and this is the second one. So these are 2 roads that we can find on the map of the general staff. Let's open them once again. And Russians have their positions between these 2 roads, and we have these positions as well. And we have them as a contested area because pro-Ukrainian resources reported that they managed to counterattack to restore control over these territories. But when talking about this area, more or less everything is the same. There are differences. We mark this territory as a contested area. The Russians show this territory as the territory under complete Russian control. But the most important is the territory further to the west, to the east, from the settlement of Zolotoy Kolodец. We have this pocket. This is the pocket on the map. But according to Russians, some territories are taken to the south of the settlement of Gruskaya, and the Russians answered the village itself. So according to the general staff, the Russians control this pocket as well. So something like this is also under complete Russian control, and we are talking about this part, and maybe even further in the eastern direction. So this territory is the territory where we can find lots of clashes between Russians and the Ukrainians. And as for the end of the 30th of August, nobody published anything about the situation in this area, just the Minister of Defense and the General Staff. Now let's go to the Pokrovsk agglomeration. There are also some interesting changes, and the most important pocket, the most important progress on the ground worth attention is the Russian breakthrough in the direction of the settlement by the name of Grushina. So this is a breakthrough. This is the breakthrough I'm talking about. This is the settlement of Rodinska, this gray point. We have Russian positions to the north, and we have significant progress to the west. We have this intersection of roads, and this is the intersection of roads or injunctions of roads, as you can see on the map. And the Russians are saying that this territory is under complete control. So the Russians are saying that the village of Novoalexandrovka is under complete complete control of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. And according to them, something like this is currently taking place to the west and to the northwest of the settlement of Rodinska. So as you can see, according to this map revealed by the General Staff, one of the most important lines was cut by the Russians without any chances, and Ukrainians have just M30 road for evacuation, supply and support. And the distances to this road, let's say from the village of Novoalexandrovka, is less than 4 kilometers, which is obviously a kill zone for the armed forces of Ukraine, and around 5 kilometers from the settlement of Kotlina. So based on this report, based on these maps, based on these, let's say, things that were revealed by the Minister of Defense, we can make 100% sure conclusion that the city of Pokrovsk, the entire Pokrovsk agglomeration, was caught in cauldron by the armed forces of the Russian Federation, or at least was caught into the operational encirclement. Another important thing is the southeastern flank of the Mirnograd. We've been discussing the situation here during the previous days, that Ukrainians counterattacked, that Ukrainians managed to restore control over these territories. And as you can see, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation and the General Staff confirms this information. The southern part of Novoekonomichna, the villages of Nikolaevka, Mirolubovka, and Nikolaevka, either under complete Ukraine control or in the gray zone. So the Russians are saying that these territories are under complete control of the armed forces of Ukraine. So we can, or at least in the gray zone. So this is the pocket we are talking about. So as you can see, the Russians today shown us a very interesting map. And this map, of course, changes completely the understanding of the situation along the line of combat contact, especially in the Pokrovsk direction, especially in the Slaviansk Kramatorsk direction, of course, especially about the city of Siversk, and of course the Kupyansk direction. And obviously, if every single report, number and square kilometer colored in Russian favor is correct, we can say that the Ukrainians suffer huge problems right now along the entire line of combat contact. And now let's move to the Zaporizhzhia direction. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians reported that the village of Kamyshevacha was taken. And later, the Russians published this video where we can see how the Russians of the group of forces East were fighting for the settlement. And in this part of the video, we can see two Russian soldiers that raised Russian flag and the flag of the unit that was involved in the combat operation. So this is the situation by the end of the 29th of August, and this is the situation by the end of the 30th of August. The Russians took the village, and now they will move further in the western direction with the purpose to get as close as possible to R85 road. As for the General Staff map about this territory, everything that you can see right now in front of your screens is probably 95% the same as the General Staff shown us today during their summer military campaign report. Now let's discuss a few more reports, updates that are coming from the territory of Ukraine. During the previous 24 hours, somebody assassinated a political person, a deputy of Ukraine, person by the name of a Ukrainian official. He was responsible for the beginning of the anti-terrorist operation in Donetsk in 2014. He was assassinated. He was deputy. He used to be a former speaker of parliament of Ukraine. So today, currently very difficult to understand who exactly assassinated this political, but obviously this is a very strong message to Ukraine and Ukrainian authorities that nobody in Ukraine has 100% protection. And if Russians did this, this means that the Russians answered a very, very probably dangerous path for the Ukrainians, and most likely Russians are not going to stop. Ukrainians have two options: either not to accept demands of the Russian Federation, or things that we see these days will continue. We're talking about massive missile strikes, significant progress on the ground, and of course assassinations of Ukrainian politicals. And that's it for today. Military Summary Channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye-bye.